So just to start off, like for those who do not know, like what is DACA?
So DACA is a program, it's called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It started in 2012 with President Obama. And it was meant for children who were brought to the United States whose parents brought them, like they didn't voluntarily come. You had to be under, 15 when you entered, had to be in the United States for at least 5 years in 2012. So that means 2007. So someone who's come in since 2007 is not eligible. That's something that I often get questions about. And you had to be under 31 at the time. So it really was meant to be, very much a for children program. It's crazy now though, because like I have clients who are DACA recipients and, it's 9 years later and, they're full grown adults with kids and things like that. And so, it's definitely interesting. You have to see how the program's grown.
Yeah, and a Texas federal judge or federal court judge, he published his opinion on DACA, challenged the legality of the program, and he doesn't believe it's a lawful program. And he's not allowing applications to be granted at this time. So, in other words, he's not continuing with the program for those who now want to apply, but he is allowing those existing DACA applicants to renew, right?
Yes. So yeah, no new additional DACA applications. So President Trump had, gone the opposite way, and he had announced in his administration to cease DACA applications, and then there was all this litigation over it that eventually went to the Supreme Court. So for about 4 years, they weren't accepting new initial DACA applications. That's that first time application. So a lot of those people who are applying for that either are people who didn't trust the system, who are applying for an initial DACA now, or people who didn't trust the system originally, or people who have come of age, because you have to be a certain age to actually be able to apply. So you're talking about people who were literal babies at this point, because if they had been in the United States since 2007 and then haven't applied because they were too young, that they were literal babies whenever they were brought to the United States. So it's very interesting because we had about 4 years of no applications. It got reopened because the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's ending of the program violated the Administrative Procedures Act. Well, Judge Hannon out of Texas is saying that DACA's original executive order from Obama violated the Administrative Procedures Act. And frankly, I don't know that he's totally wrong. That I don't know that either one of them went through the proper rulemaking procedure for the process. But it is something that the Biden administration could fix. They could just go through the proper rulemaking. And, they have the authority to do that. It would take, some time because you have to go through like publishing the proposed rule and comment and things like that. But he's early enough in his administration that he has plenty of time to do it. And I just don't know what the strategic political motivation is to not do that.
What do you think Biden should do? Like, I mean, he could, like said, like he could do something and do something now.
I mean, like the best thing would be to pass it through reconciliation, get a real pathway to citizenship, make it so that this is a permanent program, make it an actual law. I don't know whether or not, because there are some moderate Democrats who are kind of opposed to using reconciliation for immigration purposes. I think it was 2006. It was sometime in George W. Bush's administration where the Senate was controlled by Republicans, and on their reconciliation bill, they included not this immigration language, but some other immigration language in the reconciliation bill. It was ultimately taken out and what didn't pass in the final law. But that is good precedent that, when the Senate was controlled by Republicans in a Republican administration, they thought you could use the reconciliation bill for immigration purposes. Why can't you now? So that's good precedent for it being legal, that it wasn't parliamentary and didn't object to it then. And so that would be the ideal, get it passed through Congress, make it a real law. Law is the gold standard, because regulations and rulemaking, it can change every administration. So, Trump gets reelected in 2024, that he can do the regulations and rulemaking process too and abolish the program. So I would love it if it passed the reconciliation process, but you don't know. If we're going to know about that in the next couple of weeks. If that is not the pathway that they want to go down, then I think the proper thing to do is to go through the rulemaking process.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on the American Dream and Promise Act of 2021? Like, it's currently stalled in the Senate, and it needs at least 10 Republican votes.
A long time, people didn't want to push DACA too hard, the Dream Act versions of the Dream Act too hard, because they wanted a larger scale comprehensive immigration reform. And I think that we've just realized that, that is probably not something in our near future, because Americans are really divided on immigration. And it's harder. So I think that if it was actually put to a floor vote, I think that you would have a hard time having like people like Marco Rubio or people like that vote against it, because it is a very sympathetic group. And with, like states like that, like, Texas and Florida have a more Latinx community. So you're going to have like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz are going to have more pressure to like actually vote for it. But that's probably why it's stalled, is because they don't want to have to make those votes.
There's also Biden's proposed U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 that was sent to Congress, and I'm not sure what happened with that. Do you know anything about that?
My understanding is that like his big immigration reform bill, like Democrats are a very wide variety of people. And like there were some factions that said it went too far, some factions that said it didn't go far enough. And so I don't even know, because that hasn't even passed the House, I don't think, because there were just too many different directions that the Democrats wanted to take it. So it hasn't really moved forward. And until you have something that has, broad Democratic support, you can't really like then ask Republicans to sign on.
So I think you talked about this like for a second, but when you do talk to those that are applying for DACA, like what are their like main concerns with it? Or do they feel like they're in alignment with the pathway to citizenship?
So, the concerns are that you are telling the US government where you are, that you're undocumented, you're kind of revealing information about yourself. Is ICE going to use that information to come after me? And especially after the Trump administration, people feel uncomfortable because they are outing themselves as undocumented. So that's a hesitancy I see with some people about why they don't want to apply. The other is that, you don't get, it's not a pathway to citizenship. It's just work authorization and a promise not to deport and, kind of benefits like that. So if they are eligible for something else, a lot of people will be like, well, I don't want to apply for DACA because, I've got a U.S. citizen spouse and I'd rather go through that way because that way is an actual path to citizenship. So.
And, what can activists and others do, to make it known to this administration and the Congress and just all our leaders that, there needs to be a pathway to citizenship now?
So I think the most important thing is to actually tell your story. If you're a DACA recipient, if you are undocumented, it is so much harder for whenever you're talking to members of Congress and their staff for them to be like to tell you to your face that they don't care about you. Sometimes they will. I've done some state lobbying and they aren't always very polite about it. But what I see with a lot of my community work is that once people realize that they know someone undocumented, it kind of changes their perspective. Because they'll say, oh, I know Jessica and she's a great girl and, she, whatever. And it because it is so easy to be like, okay, they didn't come here the right way, they're illegal, they broke the law, blah, blah. When really an illegal entry is the equivalent of a speeding ticket in federal court. Like it's not, it's not, like a domestic violence thing. It's just, it's a misdemeanor and it's, it is breaking the law, but I think everyone has sped at one point or another. And so they also broke the law. So, but, people have these mentalities, against the foreign, against, these lawbreakers and whatnot. But when they actually meet people who are undocumented or used to be undocumented, it can really change their perspective. And also it changes a lot of their perspective whenever they realize that there's not a lot of ways that people who are undocumented to fix their status in the United States. And so I think the more storytelling you do, the better off you are, not only with your congressional representatives, but also with your community at large.
I mean, if there wasn't DACA, like, is there another way? Maybe, I don't know, like TPS, that way, like they could, I don't know, become citizens, or a pathway to become a citizen, and
So TPS is even less than DACA. Like TPS is, has to be, you have to have a presidential proclamation constantly every couple of years to say, yes, we're extending it. You have to be from a certain country. Like there's no pathway. The Supreme Court ruled against, the ability to adjust after you've gotten approval through like a U.S. citizen spouse or child or whatnot. I have a lot of those cases where, Tennessee was one of the states that you could do that in because it was like a circuit divide, like certain circuits had one rule and Tennessee had another. And so that's going to be interesting for my clients who currently have their green cards to that. Like, are they going to be able to apply for citizenship? Like, what is the rule going to be? So Congress needs to probably act on that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because an unlawful entry prevents you from a lot of ways to change your status in the United States. You have to leave and come back in. And once you leave, if you've had any unlawful presence, then you have a 10-year bar to your reentry and you have to apply for a waiver. So, and you don't know the waiver is going to get approved. So you're leaving with the hope that your waiver will get approved, and it might not. And it's just a really scary proposition because for a lot of people, it's leaving their family with no idea of whenever they'll see them again. So it's rough.
yeah, it sounds rough. It's like they've already got their roots here and they have jobs and they have their families, and it's like, okay, well, I want to be a citizen. You apply, and then you have to go back to the country that you were in, and that just is scary. And I feel like, in my personal opinion, like there's got to be like a better way, and I'm really hoping that like this administration can find a better way for a pathway to citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you are a DACA recipient, you have probably not been back to your home country since 2007 at the earliest, because you've had to been in the United States since 2007. So that's 14 years. You haven't been home to your home country. Is that even your home? And when you were brought in, you were, under the age of 15. So like you've spent, just logically, you've spent more time in the United States than outside of it at that point.
Yeah, and I thought I read something about, I know they can't travel out of the country, but can they start applying to? I thought I saw something about
So there is this thing called advanced parole. That was also stopped in the Trump administration. So yes, you can apply for advanced parole, but with the Hannon decision, that's more complicated. And like, so they're processing the one that we're pending. Yeah. So, I mean, like with my clients that have DACA, like we have a big, long discussion about the pros and cons of advanced parole. But again, yeah, that was stopped in the Trump administration. So people weren't using that as like during that period. So it's new again.
Is there anything else, that you want to add or talk about that I didn't cover?
I think it's just that, these are members of our community, specifically with DACA. Like these are people who have been in the United States for at least the last 14 years. They have built their lives here. They've gone to school here. They work here. They are contributing to our culture and our society. They're not others. They're not the other. They are part of our fabric. And I think we need to embrace them as our neighbors. So, yeah.
I agree.